1270 AM WNST. Our next guest is Nestor Aparicio. Nestor, welcome in.
Dennis, how are you? How was draft weekend for you? Did you gain weight or lose weight over the weekend? I need to know.
You know what? I actually lost weight. I did 15,000 steps a day, and so it was, and I ate less.
Hold on. Were you watching it on a treadmill? What are you doing?
You know what? I can't disclose that, but
No. You were tweeting too much to do that.
I saw you eating what is it, Teddy Grahams or Honey Grahams ice cream, and I said, you know what? He's probably eaten 2 or 3 teaspoons of it because that's how he is. That's how he stays so thin. And when I saw that, I went out and took another walk just so I could get my mind off of food.
No, man, I have a scooper, a regular ice cream scooper, and I do 2 scoops. I usually shove the ice cream down in and flatten it off, and then I put 1 little scoop on top. And I've moved into green tea, green tea. I dig that. So yeah. I mean, I'm mixing the ice cream up. I got to get some purple ice cream, some blueberry ice cream around there because it was a purple kind of weekend. Luke and I were talking about it, and I know you're going to talk to him as well. I've been doing this a long time. Going to bed Friday night and looking up and seeing 6 football players in the first 106 picks, I looked up and I'm like, well, they've really sort of outdone themselves this time, right?
Yeah, to just accumulate that kind of draft capital for a team that just came off of a 14-2 record, it's an embarrassment of riches that they're adding to this roster, and I think that DeCosta did a masterful job. 3rd draft in a row, and of course this one needs to still play out to see how these players pan out. But man, the early returns are so good for this team.
Well, I think back in the day we would always sort of equate the player to the pick, and we realized, that's a dangerous proposition. I mean, especially when you look at where let's see, Dennis Pitta's career and his counterpart Ed Hartwell. My goodness, I'm mixing up names now.
Yeah. Dixon.
Ed Dixon, my bad. And then you look at let's say Hayden Hurst and Mark Andrews. I look at Patrick Queen and I look at Malik Harrison. They're not as far apart as some of these picks would be, 150 picks apart where 5 years later, you look up and say, look at this career, look at that career. You look at all of these guys, you're talking about top 100 picks. The Ravens haven't had a lot of those. A lot of the guys have panned out and been big names and done well, but top 100 picks, you're only sort of deeded to get 3 of those, right? And in a lot of those years, those deeded picks have been 28, 58, and 98 or whatever it's been, right? This has been a little different this year because I think my level of expectation for these football players is higher.
Well, Nestor, I think that the big thing is, and people lose sight of this, you build your team with your first 2 day of picks. That's when you find your all-pro and Pro Bowl players. Yes, once in a while, somebody in the latter rounds, day 3 picks will flash, but you can't miss on those picks. And the Ravens between, let's say, 2013 and 2018 or 2017, they missed a lot of those picks, which is why they were in no man's land. They didn't give Joe Flacco enough support for starters, and they were just in a sea of mediocrity. They weren't terrible, but they weren't good either. And now with being able to put back-to-back dynamic, explosive, potentially explosive draft classes, they put themselves in a conversation to be in the playoffs and contention year after year after year.
Well, I think the other part of this is once you've decided what your team is, and when you're 14-2 and you got the MVP of the league and you've run the ball like no one's ever run the ball before, you know what you are. Wink Martindale knows what this defense is. You don't have a new offensive coordinator. You don't have a new defensive coordinator. You don't have a new system, a new scheme where you are literally looking for guys to plug and play. You're looking for ideal football players. And the J.K. Dobbins thing, as much as the amateur hour was scratching their head on Friday night, I looked at it and said, they love him. They have a use for him. They will make great use of him. He must be exactly what they're looking for, or they wouldn't pick him at 55. So to say, how are they going to use him? They're going to use him. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I think that when you look at the offense and what they want to do in the way they run, this goes back to why they would take a Bredesen or why they would take a Phillips. They've identified the player they want for that, and I think they've gotten better at it over the years. I have even higher expectations for them than I've had in previous years. I do.
Well, I think you make excellent points when you talk about the continuity, Nestor, the coaching staff, the head coach, the coordinators. when you look at all the turnover around the league, just in our division alone, you have a relatively new coaching staff in Cincinnati. You have a brand new coaching staff in Cleveland again. Right? All these things, factor in and favor the Ravens.
Hey, when Stefanski came on, my wife's like, who the hell's that guy?
Right.
Is that the Browns coach? What? I mean, look, that's the beauty of the draft, I think, in general for the weekend, and especially this year, right? I mean, no, we have not been watching the Terps or the Masters or the Orioles or lacrosse or any of these other things. We've been watching this pandemic, and I haven't like everyone else. I'm not really thinking so much about football season as much as I am, is Wells Fargo going to get my PPP done, and how am I going to keep my business together, and can dentists stay open, and can my sponsor stay here, and how's my wife doing, and let's check our temperature, and let's make sure we got our mask and our gloves, and when we go to the grocery store, we get everything. These sort of first world needs, I think, have changed a little bit. This was the one weekend we sat around and we did make fun of the Browns and say who's their coach and who's quarterbacking where and where's Phillip Rivers and who did the Chargers take and where are they playing football and who's their general manager. And this was a weekend to sort of take all of that in if you haven't been as focused on that, because we've all had other things we've had to focus on the last 6 weeks.
No, it's all real good stuff. And did you enjoy the draft coverage? Did you enjoy the new optics of the league? I certainly enjoyed the my favorite part was Eric DeCosta giving us recaps. I thought he was so cool, so real, so genuine, and I love how he ended every one of his mini pressers with call your parents. What a good guy he is.
Well, did you catch he walked through the farm over to Harbaugh's house and they had a little powwow out on the farm, so yeah, look, the Ravens do a good job on social media, and I think John and Eric played along with that, and, Ozzie Newsome never wanted to do anything with the fans. I think Eric sees it a little differently, different era, different age. Certainly, Ozzie lived his whole life in the public eye, from the minute he got on the campus in Tuscaloosa on, right, as a Hall of Fame player. Eric's a little different about it, and, I think Eric comes from the fan school. He grew up a fan and became a football draftnik because he loved it as much as you love it, and he loves me because I love it, right? And so I think giving the fans a little something this weekend was part of what he wanted to do too. And I love the family thing for all the kids hopping up on mom and dad's laps and the food coming in and the dog, even Belichick's dog, Shiba Inu. I learned it over the weekend, and then I'm at their events. I'm at the annual event, and I do see a lot of the players in there. I mean, one of the reasons I know Mike Tomlin so well is I got into a game of toss with him and his boys playing football out on the lawn at the Breakers in Florida 15 years ago, whenever he took the job. That's how I know Mike Tomlin. People ask me, I'm like, I was throwing a football around with him and his boys, literally. So seeing families come together around this and seeing their houses and knowing that the cable guy showed up to wire them and the kids have to stay off of downloading while dad's making picks, all of that. And I could have done with maybe 5 less Roger Goodell boos. I ran out of gas. I think he ran out of gas based on what I saw Friday night too.
Well, I don't know why he just didn't stay in his pajamas, right? I thought that was a bit overplayed. But, again, overall, I enjoy the new format, and I would recommend that they keep it. They stick with it. I thought it was more intimate to be able to go into these players' family rooms, living rooms, surrounded by their parents, their grandparents, their loved ones. I thought the optics were better this year than any years. And, of course, the ratings were through the roof. The NFL couldn't ask for a better environment for them to thrive in.
Well, I think they'll go back to Vegas.
Yeah. Look, they're making money. They're printing money right now. They're the only game in town.
And here we are talking about Justin Matabuke, the day. So, of these picks, you're the draft, Nick. I mean, which is the one that you love? And don't say Queen, because everybody loves a first-round pick. And we all sort of... You mocked Queen, right? I mean, you were in the family of mocking him, right?
No, I mocked T. Higgins, who went to the Bengals at the top of the second round. That's the guy I really wanted, but I'm not unhappy with Queen. But Geno Stone, for me, the safety from Iowa, he was very highly rated on Pro Football Focus. I watched a lot of tape on him. He definitely has a shot to make the team. A very good instinctive player. So I'm more geeked up about the 7th-round pick more so than the first-round draft pick, because it wasn't a stretch to figure that Queen had a shot to be on our roster. But when you talk about a guy like Geno Queen, that was a bit of a stretch, and I was certainly glad. And I even said it on Twitter several times, get Geno Queen, and I thought he was gone. and I was very happy to see them select him. Of course, they had inside intel about Geno Smith Geno Stone from Kirk Ferentz at Iowa. They always seem to pick an Iowa player in almost every draft.
But rarely an LSU player, and they changed that a little bit, mixing things up here. But a lot of big school guys, right? I mean, all big school guys, really. I mean, going to Harbaugh's brother out in Michigan for an offensive lineman, getting the wide receiver from Texas, couple of Ohio State guys here. This is, big stock is where they came from with most of this class.
Yeah, they did. They like players like that, as you mentioned. Ben Breederson, 4-year starter, 2-year captain at guard for Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. So yeah, they double. I like the fact that they doubled down on receivers. Look, 2 chances to get it right. So if one receiver, one guard, and one linebacker ends up being real good, that's a home run draft for them.
Well, even when the Ravens weren't on the clock, it was fun, like watching teams try to select ahead of them, and then they dealt back, and the Packers and the Eagles had controversial drafts, right? I mean, the Bengals are going to come in here at some point with their next stud quarterback, number 1 overall, and the Steelers took some Terps guys. So, that there was a little bit of flavor for everybody. It was something to keep us all on our toes, I thought, and I did think the coverage was great, and it was the one normal thing for all of us in a time that none of us will ever remember as normal. Nothing's been normal.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Nestor, I appreciate your time as always. Thank you for being here with us on the show, and glad that you enjoyed the coverage as much as I did.
At some point, I'm going to take my pajamas off, shave again, and put a suit on. That's probably going to happen when Moeller shows up around here at some point. But in the meantime, it was a great weekend of football and ice cream eating.
Looking forward to it. Thanks again, Nestor, for everything you do.
You got it, Dan. Thank you.
Appreciate it. There he goes, Nestor J. Aparicio. With that, I'm going to turn to my main Kakalaka here.